My name is Margot Crawford, and I'm the director of the Center for Africana Studies, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our first master class with our fall 2019 artists in residence, Amadou Kansi and Musana Ali. So let us welcome them today. The Center's Artists and Scholar in Residence program brings to campus some of the most visionary artists and intellectuals of our time. And we are delighted. We have the distinct privilege this evening to hear about the work of Amadou Kansi and Musana Ali. I also want you to know that they have prepared a permanent installation for the Penn Museum's redesigned African Gallery, which will open for a full weekend of programming from November 15th to the 17th. Let me begin by introducing Amadou Kansi. He was born in Senegal in 1961. He graduated from the National School of Arts in Dakar in 1991 and has had an exceptional artistic career in painting, printmaking, installation, photography, poetry, and video. He has organized as well as participated in exhibitions and collaborations around the world. In collaboration with Musana Ali, he developed the Center for Art and Holistic Development, Ner Joel Fadjout, Senegal, in 2004. He has served on the steering committee of several organizations and was the president and founding member of Makanin Ki, an artists association working to safeguard street children in Dakar. He is a founding member and coordinator of the artist collective Huit Facettes Interaction that was showcased in Documenta 11 in 2002. In addition to the development of his personal work and the coordination of the Art Center, Amadou Kansi has worked since 2010 in collaboration with Musana Ali on large-scale interactive, community-based mosaic murals and site-specific installations in various locations throughout Senegal and the US. He lives and works in Senegal. Musana Ali was born in Philadelphia and currently lives in Senegal. She holds a BFA degree and an MA in arts education. Musana Ali is a multi-talented artist who is skilled in painting, drawing, and printmaking, and whose work covers a broad spectrum of mediums, ranging from videography, photography, sculptural installation, as well as large-scale murals and mosaics. Musana's work is defined by her interest in the holistic evolution of human consciousness. She is concerned with injustice and oppression and how these can be transformed into higher forms of social interactions through art. Musana Ali's work has been primarily community-centered since her 1999 two-year exhibition project, Porte et Passage du Retour, which took place in an abandoned building assisted by a gang of homeless teens in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. Her vision grew in 2004 when, accompanied by Amadou Kansi, she co-founded a rural center for art and holistic development through their Senegal-based association, Porte Passage du Retour. Musana's work has been exhibited internationally, and her community-driven projects have been conducted throughout the US and Africa, both individually as well as in collaboration with Amadou Kansi. Musana Ali is a recipient of numerous awards and honors, including a Fulbright Fellowship and a Pew Fellowship in the Arts. Let me now tell you a bit more about their center. Porte Passage du Retour is an association placing emphasis on art and creativity to ensure the vital, necessary relationship between people and nature for holistic well-being and intellectual and creative sovereignty within society. Founded in 2004, it is led by visual artists who have initiated a Center for Art and Holistic Development in the rural region along the Petite Côte of Senegal, which generates community-centered programs revolving around alternative engagement in art, education, health, environmental consciousness, agriculture, and eco-building in all areas of the holistic development of people and their environment. Please join me in welcoming our artists and residents for Fall 2016.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you, Margot. I'm going to start talking, and then I'm going to describe a little bit work that we do, and then Kenzie will talk a little bit more about the work that we're doing here specifically. Started. It's not lighting up for some reason. I want to thank all of you for coming, because I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really happy that all of you were able to show up. And in particular, I want to thank Isaiah Zegar, who is here, and he's been one of our mentors. You'll know him from Magic Garden, and we're presently working in his studio. He was gracious enough to offer us his space to work in.
I want to know what you do.
Yeah, you still want to know what we're doing. But because the University of Penn didn't allow certain things to be done in the museum, we needed another space, so he gave us his space, so thank you. Kenzie and I founded the association Porte de Passage du Retour, which translates as Doors and Passageways of Return, shortly after we were married and I relocated to Senegal. Being distinctly aware of the Senegalese art community's dependence on the Western world, we sought to create a more dynamic arts community in Dakar, as well as in the rural region of Nguyen, where we had acquired in 2004 10 acres of land and a 550 square meter warehouse. In the early years, we were the sole inhabitants of the region, and the 10 acres of land situated across the main road was more or less a barren landscape. The warehouse became the main workspace for our activities. Our interest in targeting this rural region resided in the fact that we were aware of the tendency of the rural population to migrate to the cities or to the west. Many country dwellers, especially the youth, felt that their region had little to offer them in the way of evolution. Yet we distinctly saw that it was in these areas that the cultural wealth was present and more vibrantly alive. In addition, the land and the wealth it offered was to be acknowledged and promoted. We felt that the majority of the residents of this area were trained to trust that Western solutions were better. So as artists, we could see ways in which art could stimulate the creative capacity of the population and offer more valuable solutions to the question of development. Solutions that would be more holistic and more in tune with the cultural values of the region. I personally was born in the civil rights era and raised in the militant Muslim movement known as the Nation of Islam. Kenzie's father was born during colonial occupation of Senegal and has shared with me many stories of colonialism in Senegal. Kenzie himself was born only 1 year after independence in Senegal. So we've been raised acutely aware of the suffering of African people. And since slavery, and what has been known, what we know is the rape of the African continent. This awareness is what drove me to Africa in order to discover firsthand what I grew up believing had been forcibly taken from me and from my ancestors. My studies led me to a master's degree with an intention of continuing studies, yet during my educational experience, I discovered that much more was being said in academia than was being intrinsically understood. And I had intended to continue for my PhD, but being an artist, I was really interested really feeling things rather than, talking about things. And so I made the journey to Africa and decided to make that my doctorate. In 1997, I traveled to about 8 different countries, and mainly by road, which is very different in those days than it is now. What do you call that? I'm so in the remote area, I don't even know the names of these things. But finding your way with these computers. We didn't have those in those days, so it's very difficult.
GPS.
Wow. I went there to research and study traditional contemporary African art and then do an exhibition based on that research. I produced an exhibition in Cote d'Ivoire in response to my encounter in Senegal and Ghana with the doors of no return, which was the final doors the Africans passed through before boarding the slave ships. I created this exhibition which I entitled Doors and Passageways of Return. And I left the New York art world desiring to break all of the established expectations for art presentations and chose to exhibit in an abandoned building, which I afterwards discovered was the home of a gang of street youth. And these boys were addicted to drugs, in and out of prison, violent, between the ages of early 20s and 12 and early 20s. And there were approximately 60 of them in the building. So, because I fell in love with the building, I overlooked that and loved it anyway. And made a deal with them to install my studio there and to produce a 2-year project in which they became fully involved. I was teaching them art, and they eventually exhibited their art alongside mine, became security guards, maintenance, and tour guides for the exhibition. And so here you'll see some images of the work that I produced after 2 years with them in that building. This exhibition was presented in 1999 in Abidjan. So all of this history is what set me on the path for life that I was to create for myself and my family in Senegal. Having met my future husband during a relatively brief encounter in Cote d'Ivoire when I first went there. It wasn't until 2000 when I would see him again in Senegal by chance on Gorée Island, which is the island the slaves were taken from. So that was very symbolic. In the meantime, between the time I would see him again, I started a nonprofit organization in the U.S., which was to raise money for the youth, for them to be able to continue their work, and my intention was to create an art center in Cote d'Ivoire with this nonprofit. Civil unrest in Cote d'Ivoire prevented me from achieving that goal, and my marriage in 2002 and subsequent fairly rapid arrival of my children rerouted me and rooted me in Senegal, where together with my husband I founded a sister organization to my nonprofit entitled Porte et Passage du Retour, which is the same name, Doors and Passageways of Return. After years of functioning as an association to make contemporary African art more relevant to the urban and rural populations of Senegal, we established an art center in the region in Jawaf Fadjout, which is 115 kilometers from the capital, approximately a 2.5-hour drive. In those days, 4 hours before they built the roads. And we started to work out of the warehouse, this huge warehouse that we had there. Aware of the migratory tendencies of Africans and the comparative disparities between those living in the rural regions and those in the cities, we chose to relocate ourselves to this region in order to hopefully open to the inhabitants the endless possibilities that art could offer them. We saw the value and the richness of that region, and were acutely aware of the fact that the capital was a place where was a place that only sought to imitate the West, which in our eyes already had proven a failure to raise humanity to a level on par with its technological advancement. And what we had discovered was that the human qualities in the region of Senegal were much more valuable than any riches we could have accumulated in the city. These qualities, accompanied by a rich cultural net that held them in, were what caused us to entirely relocate to this region from the city with our 3 children, who were then 4, 8, and 9 years old. We lived for 2 years in the warehouse along with our permanent workers and volunteers. In the center, in this, what was called the center of nowhere, which was to us the center of our world. Surrounded by baobabs, lurking hyenas, a wild, unbridled nature, and sparkling starry skies, we began to make things happen. We transformed this space into an art center complete with exhibition area, library, office space, kitchen, studio space, prayer space, and sleeping areas with a number of tents installed behind tall, colorful curtains. This was the warehouse only, so we were actually living in the warehouse when we first moved there. In 2015, we built an adobe home and moved across the road to the 10 acres of land owned by the association. Our art center is now composed of the 2 locations, and the entire surrounding region is our campus. We regularly receive artists, both national and international, and collaborate with educational institutions at home and abroad. We work with urban and rural school children, municipality, local artisans, and have a special long-term relationship with a wonderful collective of women potters in the nearby village. We initiate programs that are in keeping with our mission and values, which range from programs and workshops and camps for children and adults, printmaking, ceramic, other forms of art, agriculture, reforestation workshops, and eco-building, etc. Our most recent project was called All About Fish, or Janrek, which is the Wolof version. And it took place in a neighboring city, in the neighboring town of Joal Fadjout, which houses one of the largest fishing ports in the country. This project addresses the issue of illegal overfishing and encourages social empowerment by placing large-scale permanent artworks co-produced by the artists and the community on the theme of fish throughout the city of Joal. Over the years, Kansi and I have worked and exhibited individually as well as collectively, producing major works involving the communities in various regions of the world. Having been fully inspired by our early lives and our sense of a need for Africans to regain a sense of sovereignty, and our experience in living so close to nature and essentially off the grid, this experience, one that has greatly transformed us, has inspired our art, and the art of others has inspired us, the courage of others, our love for Africa, our hopes for our children. With all of this inspiration, we created the Center for Art and Holistic Development. And our proximity to nature, living there, has caused us to realize that our work is not only for the development of Africa, but that Africa's development is for the world. This, in fact, brought us to and brings us to where we are now in this production of work that we're creating for the Africa Galleries, a collection of objects that we literally carried from Africa in the 2 suitcases we were permitted with our 3 children each. We found these objects imbued with the energy of the place and the people to whom they once belonged. And they, to us, are contemporary treasures which we seek to share with America, this time by choice, offering a new set of considerations to the contemporary place to which Africa has evolved. As artists, Kansi and I have long been collectors of found objects. Senegal amounts with waste areas where such objects can be acquired in abundance. We have always been fascinated by the stories that such objects tell and the histories contained in them, the living energies that they carry and the new life that they take on, the broken shapes they become that are suddenly whole and complete in and of themselves, and beautifully fascinating and full of wonder. These objects are like rocks that have been shaped and reshaped by the elements, or like these objects that are on display in the African galleries. a broken bronze part with a jagged angular back plate that is a beautiful shape in and of itself, perched on a stand inside a pristine case with perfect lighting. When one sees it in that context, one forgets the once whole part it once belonged to, the once whole society that in its absence became fragmented into parts. Many of those parts were joined together and have been added on to us, and have been added on to as have been done in the work that we are developing. Parts making up a whole, replaced, adopted, and full of memory. Memory that can never and should never be fully erased. There are many things that one can interpret in a work of art. For this reason, I often find it ludicrous for an artist to attempt to explain his or her work due to the fact that it is something that is already speaking. So contained within this work is a response to the departure of the objects that were lost to Africa, but it also contains within it a revolving door. Just as the earth is constantly turning, never stopping, and always regenerating, just as birth and death happen, just as I discovered on my journey to the slave ports in Senegal and Ghana, that there are no doors of no return.
Assalamu alaikum. Happy to be here with you all and to interact with you. I mean, it's really meaningful, our presence here. You know, being part of this important, very important project. You know, the redesigning. I wish I could say my presentation in Fulani, because I'm Fulani. I wish I could do that, you know. So I'm going to try with your language, guys. So we have to redesign our mind, you know, to be able to change, to switch the paradigm of how things are being going on and how it's still going on, and how we can have the courage to change things. So I'm happy that with Tukufu, I'm going to talk about it, how we met. Because, you know, when he called me, he was thinking about me. It's just like he was he was just one of the consequences of the colonial mindset, sorry to say it in a way. I'm just provoking you. But, you know, Africa is not only the continent, but the diaspora. It's from east, west, north, and south. And Africa will never be Africa without those parts, you know. So we're happy to be able to be part of it and to engage the battle in an aesthetic way, in a theoretical way. So I wrote a text. I wrote it in French. I'm Fulani. I wrote it in French. It has been translated in English, but I'm going to make it. So it's called The Presence of a Fundamental Absence. The synchronicity of events that shape our lives is absolutely impressive. If we think about it, everything is connected. The thread, the configuration of the relationship between circumstances, things, and people in space and time goes back further than we generally think. For example, if in September 1997, I did not go to Ivory Coast to participate in the Daro Daro International Artist Residency under the aegis of a group of Ivorian artists, the Senegalese that I am would not have met the African-American artist Moussana Ali in 1997. So, if I had not come to Philadelphia, I would not have had the opportunity to be introduced to the alternative mosaic by Ade Azaga, right here. In 2004, we could not have done a great mosaic work on the wall of Kër Cosaan Art Center in Dakar during the 2010 Biennale. It was during the inauguration of that mural that I met Gabriela Salgado, an art historian from Argentina, who invited me to participate in an artist residency at Más Arte Más Acción in Colombia. And I had the opportunity to meet myself also, you know, the diaspora of Colombia. It's in a review of contemporary Colombian art that allowed Professor Tukufu Zuberi to interview me in 2014. I answered to his question in the warehouse of the Center for Arts and Holistic Development that Musana and I have set up since 2005 in Bojien on the coast of Senegal. It was a particularly interesting interview as the relevant questions were asked and consistent answers was provided. There was a lot of talk about the work we are doing in our region of the world. This is how Tukufu called me again in early 2019 to ask me to contribute with a proposal to the exhibition he was editing for the African Galleries of Penn Museum in Philadelphia this year. As an artist couple, we proposed to him to realize an installation that would establish a multidimensional conversation with a collection of African traditional objects that will be showcases in the African Gallery. Our proposal had the advantage of coming from two artists who were both from the continent and the diaspora, and the African diaspora. It's clear that the displacement of ancient African objects goes hand in hand and obeys the same logic that saw Africa despoiled of all its resources, human, material, craft, and spiritual. The idea underlying this exhibition is how to show differently and how in a more timely manner the objects that have been taken out of their original context of life and which are presented with narratives that are mostly creation out of the mind Western intellectuals to reinforce the image of an Africa that has nothing to do with the reality of the essence of its existence, its intrinsic specificity. Like information, which becomes only data when taken out of its context, the African traditional objects found full meaning and justification of their existence in the actual roles they played in the lives of the people who gave them form, allowing them to take part of an important sacred moment of community life. Participating in this exhibition with a collaborative work of contemporary art is working to correct and refine the perception that has been theoretically perverted by a generation of intellectuals and academics who, often in good faith, have perpetuated an image erroneous of Africa. It's about objects, territory, mobility, displacement, abuse, transactions. The mark of time and space of origin and welcome, paternity and paternalism, in short, all the ingredients that makes globalization a place of hegemony, economic domination, and intellectual enslavement. The accumulation of objects is one of the essential marks of so-called advanced and progressive societies. We are invaded and submerged by a tide of objects with finite limit life, while the planet that allows them to be born is a legacy that we are not sure to properly bequeath to future generations. We are trying to establish a visual conversation between very old objects that really have no price and worthless new objects intended to age and be obsolete very quickly without any chance to cross the time despite their great ability to proliferate on all continents, especially ours. The circulation of objects and ideas is guaranteed by so-called globalization. The problem lies in the fact that, that human beings also move with their habits and customs. Their natural specificity, the things that make them different and normally enriching for others. What does one do with the spirit that prevailed at the time of creation of the traditional African objects? That's the question. How can we correct the truncated narratives that made them captive of so many prestigious Western institutions? This spirit, if we had access to it, would tell us a lot about the rhythm of life and the context that prevailed at the time. The young old and old young objects of our installation, as well as the item in the exhibition collection, has something in common. They all carry traces of the energy, the spirit of the place context, where they were born and where the rhythm of life has manipulated them for many reasons: spiritual, cultural, economics, and commercials. We are trying to make present a fundamental absence. That's the title of our work. Presence of a fundamental absence. Thank you very much.
So we have time for questions, comments, anything you want to say.
Does anyone have any questions, Jessica?
I just want to say it's so really beautiful. I'm interested in the place of sound because what I know about the Penn Museum, I'm in music, is that they got rid of all the archive of sound like 20 years ago. They gave it away to somebody because they didn't think sound was worth. So I'm interested to know in the visual if it lends itself to some sort of, because sound is presence, right? If you've worked in any way with sound in an effort to evoke feeling of presence.
That's a good question. I think the only way in which I really work directly with sound is through video, but I'm aware of sound in art and how it can play a role, and also I can say maybe through silence, because I've done works that involve meditative spaces that people have to go into and experience silence, and the energies of other people that enter those spaces and leave their energy behind, things like that. So in that sense, yes, but it's something I'm intrigued by and would be maybe
It wasn't part
eventually
of the
interested in
mandate
doing.
from the museum to.
I'm sorry?
It wasn't part of the mandate from the
No.
museum to.
No.
I mean, it just the absence of sound is really interesting
Yeah.
in terms of that.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. What is the impact of space, of this space here, on the illustration that you have in mind, and how you want to bridge that gap?
Well, it had every impact because as you see, the space is really constricted, and I mean, I'm probably the one who always likes to work big. Nancy always complains it's too big.
Yeah.
And so I wanted, I mean, you see that it's like big in that small space,
Okay.
and we wanted it to be imposing, and we wanted it to be something that really was obvious, the communication that it's having with the cases, and even to feel like it's growing out of the cases, because we were, if you see the space again, it's actually, they gave us like a little sliver wall, and then there's this, it kind of juts out from the wall, from the back wall, and then there's the back wall that extends, and then the cases. So they actually reduced that sliver part. That was supposed to be where we put our art. Originally it was supposed to be wider. So we had our work extend into those other spaces that go back, because we wanted it to reach the cases and to really feel like it's in those spaces. So they had to do a lot of work to make our work be able to hold up in those spaces that recede in the back. So it's definitely, I mean, it's just like any art that you do, you're conscious of the canvas or whatever, and you have to, work with it. And so it's not just the wall itself, but it's the whole entire room, being conscious of how the art that we produce, resonates in that space.
Can you make like a virtual display?
A
of what you-
virtual?
virtual display of what you intend, so that like you overcome the space. You could just create your own space, and then create and then place these images which like constricted by the space.
Would that,
I mean-
are you saying do that for ourselves?
No,
Or
just
for other
for
people?
this,
For
for
other
the,
people.
yeah.
It
Right.
could be done, but I don't think
Yeah.
it would be done
It's
because
not,
we
it's not a
have,
must.
we don't have time.
The idea of space is interesting because it's
Mhm.
just bringing us back to the main idea of why the need of designing this gallery. You know, you know, is a kind of is obvious right now. You know, every time I went inside that gallery, in those cases, it remind me how we have been put in cases for so
Yeah.
long,
Yeah.
and we're fighting to take out the cases.
That's right.
So one of the first titles we wanted to give to our work was caseless objects, or
Yeah.
case, you know, something, because the case was omnipresent. Some case, you know, I said no, I don't want a case, you know,
Yeah.
because you know art has no limit,
Yeah.
you know, and we have to, you know, we talk about decolonizing the way we
Mhm.
perceiving, you know, this theoretical architecture. So it just confines us in a kind of a mental space that we have to deconstruct. And the thing is, many people, they don't even have the space of thinking about it. How accurate is it? That's what resonates with me when you say space.
Yes. First of all, I want to thank you all for your insightfulness, and I also want to thank you for your ability to master language, because you're an excellent English speaker, and your choice of words are so, I mean, very well thoroughly thought through and carefully selected, and I want to thank you for
I
that.
don't know if this thing.
What I felt as an artist, I feel that oftentimes artists have an issue with the purpose that they intend to relay to their audience in respect to the venue and those who elect us to do a certain job. And sometimes that could be a sacrifice. So I wanted to go idealistically. If you had your perfect picture, how would you paint and give the exhibit without those restraints, so that I can get a clear view of what you need to relate to me as the audience? Is that a good question?
Well, if we had our own choice, we would have much more space and much more space around the work, much more space to see it from a distance and things like that. But you have to, I mean, after you start working on something and, you know, resign yourself to certain constraints, it becomes a little bit irrelevant after a while. Everything, those things don't matter anymore, because what matters is that there is that constraint, and then you have to, you know, everything would have been different if the space was bigger. Everything would have been different. So that's what it is now, and it's you know, we resign to that. I mean, we feel good about the work. It's not like it's hard, it's difficult, because once you just make that decision, you're there.
It's a permanent challenge, and coming from Africa, I just realized that we used to say many things with just one word, which is like haiku of the Japanese. So the way they make writing poetry just with just 3 or 4 words. Haiku, exactly, haiku. And you know, and the idea of space, and it made me think about also in art, in the visual art scene. Most of the time, we think that the more the painting is big, the more it's powerful. No, some paintings, some artworks are just tiny, but they're full of. It's just like a bomb, you know, contained in a little space, but everything is there. Everything is there, you know, and you know, it's always you have to also, you know, we have to be flexible to be able to achieve our goals, you know, and we came from the city. We decided to go down in the rural area. We didn't have nothing. We just have tents. We were living with tents with Nuria when she was a baby, and you know, and we didn't have, you know, the best omelette we ever have is was that time, because you had to go look for wood and the smoke of the wood coming inside the pot, it gives you something. Yeah, you can do a
The
big
time
thing
it
is
took
less.
to
Yeah.
make that omelet.
And I'm looking
So
for
much
that.
time, and you're just looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And the taste is amazing.
It's just like what art form are very dangerous tools, because everything that you have been thinking or you have been confronted with will be there. You have to be super careful. So in the same way, you know, all the energy maybe we have been dealing with to come up with that omelette, maybe give a certain flavor to the taste. You can just put it back to the artwork also, you know. I don't know if my English is correct enough.
I wanted to make a comment on this image
Yeah.
because we didn't describe it in any way, but this part right
Shape,
here,
yeah.
this shape came from one of the ivory tusks, carved sculptures, and it was when they put the ticket of identification on and took it off, it left this mark.
Mm.
And we were really inspired by that mark, that shape, and it reminded us of continents. So we brought in this idea of doing these shapes that remind you of continents. So our work developed out of that.
And also it has something to do with the displacement of this object. This was about from a continent to another continent. It was triangle, you know, from Africa to here to Europe, you know, it was, sorry.
Well, when the warehouse, the work that I did in Cote d'Ivoire with the street youth, that was before we were married. That was in Cote d'Ivoire. So I did that alone and worked and was actually teaching them art. And so some of the work that they did was inspired by my work, definitely, because I gave them assignments and things like that to do. And I don't know so much if I can say my work was inspired by them, but maybe in other ways, because just my work, being there with them for 2 years, seeing them in and out of prison, seeing one of them actually get killed by the police while I was there, and just having this new experience with another world that I felt that I would be a part of, but felt very alien to at the same time. I learned many things, and I think it really inspired, like I said, that experience working with the street youth is what made me take the transition from being a gallery artist, a studio artist, to an artist who wanted to dedicate her work to community and making a change.
And when we were, I mean, in that area where we were living, before starting to work, we were just, because, you know, when we do public art, you have to negotiate with the space which is receiving you, which is hosting you. So you just can't come somewhere and just start working. You have to negotiate everything on different level. So we have been going around, and that area, 15 kilometers from us, it's a totally rural area. They have a weekly market, a rural market. It's so interesting. I like that market because if I'm there, just like I'm in another time space, and you see real people. Really, there's no, you don't see people with the logo of Facebook like that. You don't see that. You know, having a device, no. But what I wanted to point out is that we met there a group of women potters. They're really artists, very good artists. The only thing is that they're from a rural area. And when we talk about visual art, most of the time it goes with urbanity, because everything which makes it happen is in an urban space. You know, the schools, the place where they showcase the galleries, the historian, the buyers, and when we met them, they were kind of dubious about us. They was thinking that we came to steal their technique, but we were just moved by how powerful they were, And for them to come to work in our space, they had to, because they were all married, and they didn't trust us. They had to send one of the representatives of the husbands to come to see the place. And we start working with them. And you know, our relationship with that group of women is really beyond any expectation. They didn't trust us. Now they trust us. The trust they have on us is too much. I don't know how to handle it. and we introduced them to murals and to printmaking, and they inspire us the same way we inspire them, and we learn a lot from it. There's a relation of dignity and respect. You know, in 2014, we had a big grant, and I hired one guy from the capital, and he came, and he was taking care of the money, accounting, and the way he was talking with those ladies, I didn't like it, and they didn't like it, and I know that they knew that I knew. And the guy, he was not aware, because the way he was talking to them, they creating a kind of relation of money. If you don't do this, I'm not going to do it. I said to him, come on, please don't talk about money. You're not here for the money. And be super careful about how you're talking with these ladies. We are the same family. We don't talk about money. Money is just something after. Now we're just doing our thing. And we're learning a lot from them the same way. Did you see that big fish was made out of fish? I mean, that image, it was in the house of, we don't realize it, just like the shape she was mentioning right now in the collection. It's just unconscious. I realized afterwards when I was checking the pictures that when we went for the first time to talk with them, that fish was in one of the walls. And the pots were not so far. I didn't rationally integrated it at that time, but we came with that idea. And we just interconnected. And one of our...
Did you explain what the idea?
The idea, yeah.
We actually had the women create these fish out of clay.
Out of clay.
So there are about 21 of them. So they all collectively, individually created huge containers full of fish, brought them to us. We took the fish, created the wall form with fish in it, this one, and then we invited them to come and paint around the fish. So that was a collaboration. And this is in the town of Joao Fadjut, the project all about fish.
And also those ladies, because this is a little town, and they come from a village, it's kind of far. And for the first time, people in this town have seen women having, painting on the wall. Many people were surprised. And also, what I wanted to say, I lost my mind. But anyway, we learn a lot from them, and they learn a lot. We just exchange,
And you can see the professional level of their work. They had never painted before, except on their sculptures.
No sketch.
And they never painted on a flat
This is
surface.
just like jazz.
So the first thing we did was invite them. The first painting project, was when we invited them to paint our house. After we built our adobe house, they painted the entire outside of the house. So our house looks like this on the outside. And it was so beautiful that we said, wow, they could probably do printmaking. So we did a workshop with them. We taught them printmaking, and they made T-shirts and did prints that we sold and things like that. And then we did more things with sculpture, huge size sculptures. They produced a giant, because they would make all these little animals, which they called furniture. Because you set them in your house and just look at them. And so we had them make a large size of a small thing, and we put the chicken that they made on top of the house, the roof of our house. And so many people came and wanted one just like it, so they started making these giant size clay sculptures.
I have to go teach, but I wanted to say before I leave that I really appreciate you both. I want to thank you for your contribution. Your creativity is always extremely inspiring to me. And a lot of it is listening to you talk. I've seen a lot of your work, and it's inspiring as well, but I'm always fortunate to be engaging with you both at the intellectual space, not just know I appreciate that. And I just cannot wait to see your full piece in the galleries. I love what you say. As you know, we're walking in the same path. It's the same struggle around how do we take this information and do what we do. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
From my heart, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm really, when we see the objects of the museum itself, first of all, has there been any conversation with the museum about the return of these objects in some way? Because it does feel like they are out of place.
That's a big issue. Big issue.
It would have been interesting if Tukufu
Yeah,
answered that
he was-
question.
he was the- he was the one.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you had to leave, but,
Yeah.
and then if you have incorporated them into your exhibit, into your, whatever it is,
Piece.
your pieces, is there going to be a kind of policing of the gallery to keep them protected? Because they have, do you know what I'm saying? What worries me is about how the public will engage. Not worries me, but what I'm curious about is how something that seems to be of value in that way, it's not behind a glass case. Is it still behind a glass? Yeah.
we
It's
haven't-
very interesting to have taken them out.
No, we haven't actually taken them out.
Oh, you haven't?
We haven't.
What if
They
I
wouldn't
see-
let us do that.
Yeah, no, but that's what,
No.
yeah.
So they have to be behind the glass cases. So
you just
our
trying to
work
put-
is with these objects that we brought, entirely using the objects that we brought over. And the objects themselves, when we said that, we meant the objects are engaging on another level with those
Right.
works. And so the idea is that the work that we produce it's just creating kind of a conversation with the work that is on display behind the cases. So this is like like Kenzie said, out of the case. You know, there's behind the case. So we trying to create another thought process about how these works should be viewed and about what actually happened, how they got there, and the journey they went through.
And right now there's a big debate about the repatriation of those objects and who they belong to. We know who they belong to. Just like you come to my house or I come to your house, you have a donkey, I take the donkey and I say, okay, you're going to pay me, or I'm going to, and you ask me for the donkey, I say, no, I have the donkey. No, I come and take it, but it's from your house. But it belongs to you, but you can't have it. And I'm going to make you pay even to see my donkey.
Can I just ask, is this a debate happening with the Penn
Yeah,
Museum?
but,
It is,
but
eh?
even at home also, internationally.
Well, I know it's internationally, I'm interested in our home.
Oh, yeah, yeah, oh, okay.
Well, Tukufu Zuberi is the
Yeah,
curator.
that's the person.
He is the one who initiated this project, and he is in kind of a battle to make this happen.
Right, and
And this is all about that.
yeah, he curated this exhibit
Yeah.
in order to spark this conversation.
Right.
So it's directly focused on these questions.
And are they listening, is really the question. Because people can be pretty arrogant here, you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
You mentioned something about the non-money economy culture that you're working in. Can you talk about more of the role of these artifacts in your culture? How it relates to that?
The role of those artifacts in their culture.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, those artifacts was not, just like the idea of artists and even the idea of art, the way we perceive it from a Western perspective is totally different than the way it has been dealt with or lived with in other cultures. Just like even the idea of individual artists, signing an
That's what I
artist.
want you to talk about.
We
Because-
didn't sign. I'm so happy as an African contemporary of now, finding myself just like working sometime like those African who were working, just like the work is for the community. Who's gonna sign it? If I had, just like when I had to make sign, because we had the grant money, I had to pay them. So if you have to pay, you have the receipt. The receipt is for one person. I had that problem. Technically, how they gonna sign, put their name on it? I mean, what I want to say is that those artifacts and objects was part of a sacred moment. It was part of a global performance. It has a meaning. It was in tune with the rhythm of life of that period of time. It has a meaning. It has nothing. It has nothing to do with market, selling, buying, owing, or showcasing in a wall. It was just for a specific moment. It was playing that role. So the money was not an issue. So it's one of the consequences of the globalization process. Let's call it capitalism. Make it happen in this tragic way. And one of the things which we have to be conscious also is that one of the tragic stage of the capitalism is when human being and object, they have to put a price on them. The same way they displace people, the same way they displace these objects. What about the life and the rhythm and what's all the context of living, spiritual, that was going on around those objects? That's what is it about.
And some of them were very major
Exactly.
objects that
Exactly.
had a huge, the absence of which had huge impact on Africa even today. So those are the things that we
Just like a disruption. The disruption has to go with the fact of displacing many people and also displacing those objects. They had a meaning. And so now it's a big debate internationally, even in Senegal. But the funny thing is that from the French air spoken country, that's the president of France who just initiated kind of, after that people have pushed, that decide, okay, there is one guy, he's a very brilliant intellectual from Senegal, his name is Felwine Sarr, he's an economist, but the way they have been dealing with that issue is complicated. It's just following the same path of the colonialism, because they just, for example, those from the French-spoken country, they didn't take into account people from the diaspora, or even from those from the English-spoken country didn't from the spoken country, French, now the space, coming back to the space, how we can dismantle that space so that we can focus on the issue, and we can just federate all the ideas, so that we can see the thing as something that has happened to all Africa. There's not one Africa, it's all Africa. So I hope I answered your question.
The follow-up is there any insertion, inclusion of indigenous religious concepts in the discussions that are going on?
Sorry, can you say it again, please?
Is there any insertion of indigenous religious concepts in the stuff that's going on?
religious concepts. And when you say stuff that's going on, you mean at the museum?
As it relates to these artifacts, because let's say, book, like Harry Sawyer on the ways of the Nindi people that actually cover some of this.
I don't know beyond what, I'm assuming that those things are being made known at the museum and the exhibition itself. They're being talked about originally. And I think that I'm pretty sure that this exhibition is going to definitely be worth going to, not just for our art, but but it's going to be a powerful exhibition. And it's something that's never been done before in terms of showcasing traditional African art.
And that's, I think, unfortunately, a good place to end. If we do have more questions, we can do that over food. But let me, before we thank them again, let me say that Amadou Kansi and Masana Ali are going to hold another master class. So don't be too mad at me that I'm shutting it down now, because on Saturday, November 23rd, they will deliver their second master class or at the Penn Museum. And let me also take this moment to let you know that from the 15th to the 17th, we do indeed have the opening of this redesigned African gallery in the Penn Museum. I want you to know that November 15th, it's the screening of Tukufu Zuberi's Decolonization and the Role of Museums in Contemporary Society. So that's Friday, November 15th, once again. As you've heard them say, Tukufu Zuberi curated this exhibit. And so then the next day, Saturday, November 16th, will be the full symposium hosted by the Center for Africana Studies there at the museum. And it's entitled, the symposium, Emancipating the Colonial Exhibition of Africa in the West. Sunday, finally, November 17th, gallery tours. So we hope you will attend all of this. There is food next door. Let the conversation continue. Let us thank them for taking us out.